Let's call our meeting to order. Welcome to this quarterly meeting of the Hutchinson Board of Education. Today is Monday, August 24th, 2020. We are meeting live in the Hutchinson High School auditorium, and this broadcast is being broadcast live on HCVN cable. It is not being live streamed and it is not being recorded. So if you have cable, that would be the only means to be able to watch this this evening. Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present, along with our Superintendent, Darren Vanderheiden, our Recording Secretary, Tina Borlicek, and our Director of Business and Finance, Becky Bohl. With that, if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our flag is right around the corner. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And at this time, I'd invite any public comment. If you'd like to go through your comments this evening. Updating the board on the district's safe learning plan to return to school. I'll introduce our superintendent, Darren Vanderheiden.
Thank you, Keith. We are going to, as you can see, our entire administrative team is here tonight. We will do an update on where we're at with our planning, and then they will be available to answer any questions that you may have. The directors will handle some of the slides individually themselves, and then again, our building principals and our building administrators will be here to answer questions. So let's get started. I want to start with the 14-day case rate per 10,000. We've talked a lot about that over the past few weeks here. And as you are aware, our latest number had elevated by 10 points. So McLeod County is now at 24.84, which puts us in the range of hybrid education for all. And we're going to talk about what that might look like. If you recall, the week prior we were at 14.52, and the week prior to that we were at 4.47. So we've jumped a couple of ranges, and it does put us in that hybrid range for all. Just to quickly review the levels, from 0 to 9 would be in-person learning for all students. 10 to 19 would be in-person learning for elementary and hybrid for secondary, and from 20 to 29, it would be hybrid learning for all. 30 to 49, it's hybrid for elementary and distance learning for secondary, and any number over 50 would be distance learning for all students K-12. The calculations come out each Thursday, usually around 11 a.m. or so, and we continually track those on a daily basis. But our numbers that we track are not official. These numbers are 2 weeks old when we get them, but they are the official numbers from the Minnesota Department of Health. So as I had mentioned, that range puts us in the hybrid learning mode for K-12, and that's what I would recommend. We planned for in our first day of school then would be hybrid learning. We've been in that planning mode for some time. We did send out our AV schedule to parents and with their child identified as either an A or a B student, and they've gotten that information along with some of our quick guide resources and some of our FAQs. So tonight's presentation will give you more detail about the hybrid system. I'm going to stop right there and take any questions that you may have based on that information.
I guess I know you don't want to give us an official number, but can you tell us what the number forecasts to be? Higher, lower, average, same?
Yeah. Again,
your unofficial numbers.
Yeah. For this coming Thursday, we think the number will be elevated past 24. We don't know exactly where that'll be. I think it'll hover right around that 30, but again, those are all based on unofficial numbers at this time. Also wanted to mention, last time we talked about the consultation with the Minnesota Department of Health. As you know, they will allow us to go with a more restrictive model, but they won't allow us to go to a less restrictive model without their approval. So I have scheduled a consultation with them to kind of see where they're at as far as Hutchinson Public Schools go, and then the local McLeod County Public Health. I've been working with them this last week, and they are recommending that we go to hybrid learning as well, countywide.
Darren, could I ask a quick question? It says that we're updating every Thursday. Are we still planning on looking at this in 2-week segments? Or maybe we'll look at that later, or?
Yeah, it's still a 14-day COVID rate, but they just give it to us on every week. But the numbers are 2 weeks behind where we're at during that time, the reporting time.
So are we committing to models 1 week at a time? Would it be safe to say that?
Yeah, we hope not to have to do that because that puts a real burden on our staff and our families. So we're hoping once we get into the hybrid mode, we're able to continue with that mode for a period of time. But we don't know that. And if the numbers really dropped really low, or if they went really high, we might have to make another decision.
When we say a period of time, I mean, gut check, a month, 2 months, 3?
Yeah, it's hard to know because again, it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the community with the numbers. We kind of know what's happened in the last 2 weeks. So we have some idea on what our numbers are going to look like this Thursday and then next Thursday. But really, in those out weeks past that, we really don't know. I suspect they're going to continually drop based on what we're seeing now. Dr. Pullman might have a better handle on that than I would, but that's what it looks like. It's going to trend downward at that time.
Yeah, I would agree, Darren. I think that what we're seeing locally in Hutchinson is very reassuring. The big unknown right now is the mass testing, prospective testing that they did in Glencoe last Thursday. Don't know how many people are going to be positive and when those positive numbers are going to hit the totals. Is that going to be today, tomorrow, next week? We don't know. And so that's part of the uncertainty.
Say, Darren, the governor, I believe, had stated, and this is based on questions that I've gotten from members of the public, that the governor had stated that if there was an outbreak in a factory, not necessarily in your school district, that those numbers wouldn't count against you, and that you could apply for a waiver in order to, go back to what our original plan was, or to do something other than what that particular subset might indicate. Is that accurate?
Well, it is accurate that you can do the consultation with the Minnesota Department of Health. Ultimately, they make that decision, and if you want to be less restrictive, then you go through the consultation and you try to seek their approval for that. You can be more restrictive without that process. In our case with McLeod County, we did have an outbreak at one business, but there's also other local conditions and local spread that is contributing to our higher numbers. So it's not just isolated to that case.
So, and another thing that I think it's important for the public to understand is that once we get rolling with this, I mean, we decided this a couple of weeks ago that we do the in-person learning, but that was probably about the last decision that the school board is going to make in this whole thing, because now it's completely driven by our county numbers, correct?
Yeah, that is correct, and really the Department of Health will make those decisions if we don't follow the ranges.
So toggling back and forth every week or whatever we do is really determined by the Minnesota Department of Health, correct?
It is, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. Again, that's a real burden for our families and a burden for our staff to try to toggle back and forth between models.
Darren, if I could just jump in real quick, I just want to highlight that the uncertainty that people are feeling around the plan and what's going to happen with our children isn't based on the uncertainty of anything that we're intending to do. It's the uncertainty of a pandemic. And that's what happens in a pandemic. You don't know where it's going to spring up, how big that outpouring of cases is going to be, and we just have to respond in kind to whatever that pandemic is presenting to us.
Yeah, I was sharing with the staff this morning that we really had 7 weeks of stable numbers, relatively low numbers, and that's the way it's been in other counties, and it continues to be that way. We just happen to have a spike right at the wrong time. So we hope to get through this, numbers come back down, stabilize, and we can get kids back into school full time. That's really our goal and our focus at some point.
So Darren, I have a question. If our levels drop down below 10 on Thursday, are we automatically going to all in person the following Monday? Is there, I know some districts have like a two weeks below a certain number. I know the district that's saying 3 weeks below a certain number, then they switch back. Do we have a plan for that?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident they're not going to drop that quickly, just because we're seeing the daily rates right now. I wouldn't say it would be, we're going to try not to do that on a weekly basis, but if we see the trend where they're going down and they stabilize and they stay down, I think we make the transition one time and then we stick with that plan as long as we can. I don't think we want to jump around if we can help it.
And Darren, I agree with that approach. That's the question that I'm being asked by all the families though is, okay, so now it sounds like we're gonna start into hybrid, and I know you don't have the answer to that, but then how long is it? You know, and like it just goes back to the question that I asked, and we don't have that answer right now, but if we're seeing 3-4 weeks of good numbers, then we reevaluate is what I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to pay close attention to it every single week to see what these trends are doing. What we see right now is similar numbers to what we had last Thursday. So I feel confident in saying we're probably going to be in hybrid for a minimum of a month at this point before they drop down far enough and we can trust that it's going to stay there to go back to in person. And let's hope it doesn't go the other way and actually have a more restrictive program. Just remind people that they can go to our website and they can go to the Safe Learning banner. Our Safe Learning District Guide is there, our hybrid guide, our distance learning guide, and then our FAQ guide is there as well. If they don't find their answers there, they can certainly contact central office, or if they have a specific building question, they can contact their school. So I'm going to hand this over to Mike Scott, and he's going to talk a little bit about the schedule.
Speaking a little bit to the hybrid schedule, can you guys hear that? There we go. The hybrid learning model schedule, as Darren mentioned a few of these points, K-12 families did receive information last week about whether their children were an A-day student or B-day student. A students are attending school Monday and Wednesday, and B-day students would attend Thursday and Friday. And both of those groups would be alternate, what did I say? Did I say that wrong?
Tuesday and Thursday.
Tuesday and Thursday, sorry. A-day students would be attending Monday, Wednesday. B-day students Tuesday, Thursday. And both of the A or B students would be attending alternating Fridays. So we tried to keep households, families together in designating whether their children were A-day or B-day students. There's a hybrid district calendar that shows what Fridays are those alternating A-day or B-days, and that's located on our district website. On those days that students are not in person, that distance learning would be delivered synchronous, which means live instruction, and asynchronous, meaning doing some activities that would be on their own or through guidance that their teachers have provided them. But there does need to be direct contact with students on a daily basis for their classes. Students will be following their structured schedule for the day. So if high school, for example, starts at 7:35, that's when the first class period would start. Students would be expected to be following that schedule. Same thing for our other buildings as well. We want students to be following as best as possible their structured schedule for the day. And campus, the parent portal has the information. If you haven't seen your child's designated day yet in a hybrid model, that information is listed there. Are there any questions on this
I have a question.
slide? Yes.
Are there any students that will be coming more than every other day? Are there special needs these are special education students that will be coming every day because it's on their IEPs, or, yes, no?
Yes, we will have some students that we determine need more service, whether they are just receiving more direct service during the day. And so during this week, we will be having meetings with those parents to talk about, they're called contingency learning plans, so we plan for each method of learning. So we're going to have a team meeting to talk about what that would look like for those students that need to come every day.
Other questions on the schedule?
Okay, and then when we're talking about the curriculum instruction, looking at 612, that having the same pace and scope and alignment as if we were in the in-person model. We know that that's even more especially important in the high school because trimesters are 56 days, or 56, 57 days, and students will be switching. So we want to continue to strive for having that same expectation of the curriculum delivery as if we were in person. Essential standards will be the focus, and sometimes the teachers are going to be looking at their standards in their classrooms and what is essential. I'm not saying that all of it isn't, but if there's any variant where time is of the essence, or there's a variant of time, that we want to make sure we're focusing on the essential standards. Synchronous instruction will take place each day for all students to report virtually. There needs to be some component of that, and that would be an expectation for students to be able to log into their classroom and see their teacher and see their instruction. And teachers may also assign asynchronous work as appropriate. Are there any questions at the 612 level? And very similar to some of these things in the K-5 level, that essential standards will be a focus again. And having our teachers looking at those this week, and as the term continues to be looking at those standards. There will be some synchronous or live classroom lessons. We know that students may not be able to be on looking at a screen all day, and managing a classroom with much younger students we know is different than managing older students who are in another, in our high school or middle school. But synchronous learning or live lessons will also take place. There will be very consistent meeting live each day with morning meetings or closing circles, calendar time, those type of activities, so that teachers are interacting with students. Students who are unable to be live may view the recorded sessions if that is needed. And students will receive core instruction during the in-person class time with an extension of core instruction on the at-home day. Any questions on either one of those?
So I'm assuming the K through 5, if you're in class on Monday, the student that comes on Tuesday to the live classroom will get the same lesson as they got on Monday? I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but so you don't necessarily have to dial in online on Tuesday because you're going to have the same thing you had on Monday. There might be something extra. So basically, if you come to school on Monday or Tuesday, it's the same lesson, K through 5. Okay.
So the off day for those students would be a combination of independent work, some more creative, autonomous type of work. It could be some electronic. We've got some programs that's individualized, instruction using technology. So there are options that we're looking for that off day. The synchronous part might be more of a calendar time where it's something that's not exactly building from one day to the next. That kind of instruction that could take place. And then as we move forward, as the parents get used to the technology, as we get Chromebooks home, because our second and third graders aren't going home with the Chromebook, on the first day of school. So as we move into that, the longer we stay in the model like a hybrid model, we can work with families and kind of work with our grade levels to see what kind of things we can do on that off day. The hard part is that the teachers, they still have the kids in front of them, and it's really difficult with young kids to try to pull off both scenarios in one setting. So we're brainstorming ideas how to make that off day a good learning day for kids, and it doesn't always have to be that they open a Chromebook, because young kids we don't want them to be in front of a Chromebook all day either, you know, so that's important.
I guess I just wanted to make the distinction that if you're 6 through 12,
Yeah.
you can't skip the virtual day because you're going to miss content, versus if you're a first grader and you have to go to daycare and you have to miss and your parents get home late, you can't make up the lesson that night, you're not going to miss something very important that you wouldn't, versus the 6th or 12th grade. So they're different, I guess is what I was trying to get at. Expectations are different for those students.
And we've gotten feedback from those types of scenarios where they are worried about the ability to do that, because we do have parents that are planning on pooling together their kids, sending them over to someone on the Monday and then another on a Wednesday, or vice versa. So we are aware of that, and I think that's if we make it more, if we can allow for some flexibility there with which our staff are more than willing to do, I think it'll be okay.
It's important to remember that this is going to be a real challenge for our staff. We've done distance learning, and we've obviously done in-person learning for a very long time. So their first priority is going to have to be the students in front of them, and then we want to keep our other students engaged on those off days and do the best we can. But everybody just needs to be patient and give this a little bit of time to work as well.
And because at West, our students are ages 5 through 6, it will even be a slower building model, instructional model. So the instructional strategy that many West teachers will be implementing is when students are in front of me as the teacher, we do it together. So tomorrow on your home day, you can do. So a lot of the activities will be things that will be enhancing what they learned in person and an opportunity to practice what they learned. Again, without the, having things that necessarily need to be returned every day, because we know that home day will look very different for students based on their family situations.
It seems to me like the goal is to get them all back into school. And so this hybrid is the way to get to that goal. So they can be distanced and safe at school, so that our numbers go down and we can bring them all back to school, whatever they're doing at home. Maybe they're just playing outside. I don't have a problem with that. But they're going to be safe in school and they're going to be safe at home, so we can bring them all back to school.
Ultimately, that's what we all want.
Go ahead.
Dr. Scott and Mrs. B, let's talk about, as the dad of 2 kindergartners and both parents working, I get this question a lot too. What type of scenario, or what do the kids do on their off day when both parents have to work? What options do they have?
Yeah, and the principals can speak to this as well, because they've been talking to their staff. And we understand that that is definitely a scenario where, even though we want to try to have a consistent schedule for students so that when they're back and forth, it's not, today I'm in school from 8 until 2:30 or 3:30, and then tomorrow my schedule is all mixed up, and then I'm back to, we want to try to have a routine as much as possible, but we certainly know that there will be situations where children will not be able to do this on an off day, given what daycare or childcare scenario that they have. So there will be recorded items, there'll be things that are sent home the day that they are in school to be able to do that, to have that built-in flexibility, and to be able to, again, access things online in their Google Classroom to be able to see what was done for that day.
And I think that the activities that the teachers are planning, and again, they're designing this, we've never done this before either, so they're really working hard at creating a plan that works well for all of our students, and that makes sense for families. So some of the activities that might be offered for kindergarten and first grade would include listening to a read aloud story, that it doesn't matter whether you're an A or a B, that would be a story that all could benefit from. So whether you get to listen to it live or see the recorded session later, or maybe you get to watch it on the weekend because that's when your family gets a chance to do that. It would always be available to you. We do know that there will be some times when a lesson will be recorded and something with technology goes wrong or something happens where the actual recording ends up stopping or something like that. So we just need families too to be patient as we work through that technology. Life happens in a kindergarten room. Somebody maybe throws up and everything goes out of off schedule. So again, it's building or going slow to be able to go fast. A lot of the activities too will be based on building relationships and maintaining connections with their teacher as well as their classmates.
If both parents are critical sector workers, the district is providing childcare, is that correct?
Yes, so that information, as we are determining tonight, if we're going to be in hybrid, and if we're in a distance learning scenario, that the district would be providing childcare for those critical sector workers if both parents are critical sector workers, or if they're a sole parent of a critical sector worker. But these are, in order for us to provide a quality daycare and not to be overwhelmed in the daycare, that is the guidelines that the state has put out in terms of who can access that daycare.
Do you know where that will be? Because we probably can't be in the schools.
Yeah, we've set up the Hutchinson Event Center, and we'll be sending information out by tomorrow in order for families to sign up for that if we're going to be going into a hybrid
That
model.
includes school.
Staff?
Yes, our school staff would be part of the critical sector worker.
I haven't heard anything about how the hybrid model impacts preschool, the Play and Learn or ECFE. If we move to a hybrid model, does that impact at that level?
So the Department of Education just issued some new guidelines after we had our whole schedule planned, our busing arranged, and our parent packets mailed out. The direction came last Tuesday. And so the new direction for preschool, public preschools, is that all of the classrooms be rearranged to be a 10-to-1 model. So it's a 10 students and staff in one cohort. And so we're working towards that. We're having to rearrange some schedules and really analyze a model that can be quickly implemented and then possibly changed back should we go to back to in-person or when we would. So we're working on that, and we'll be communicating that with families as soon as we can.
I had a question about flexibility, just getting back to that topic. One of the things that my family experienced, and I'm sure many others did, right when you have the most stable internet connection that there is, the first day of in-person or remote learning, it stops working. Is there then accommodation made for parents and families who have that difficulty on their days where they're home, or should we get to the remote learning model?
The district has purchased some internet access points or hotspots for families that do need those. We can provide that. So they have, there are certain requirements. They should contact their building principals to.
Sure. And I think that's great and that's wonderful. I guess the spirit of my question was more, hey, the internet connection went down at 9 a.m. and it doesn't come back till 2. All of a sudden they've missed a whole day. Is there a way for them to get the materials ahead of time in that eventuality or after, or how does that situation pan out?
So some of the materials at a K-1 model would be materials that a student would have with them. I think that a parent would need to communicate that with us, and we can stay connected and see what alternative activities could be done. Otherwise, we would work with that family. We'd never hold that against a family that their internet went down and they weren't able to access the activities. So we would certainly work with the family, and they could just make a call to the office, and we could make sure that we got a message to the teacher. it's important too that families realize that the teacher might not be able to answer phone calls or emails while their child is on their home day right away, because they do have students in front of them the entire day. So if they would call the office, we could problem solve and get a message to the teacher and work through it that way.
Thank you.
And I would imagine we would handle it in a similar fashion at the secondary level. Any other questions on that topic?
One about specialists. Have we altered the specialist schedule at all to adapt to the hybrid model? Meaning maybe like FIAD for one whole week straight, switching to STEM, for example.
So at West, we have altered our schedule a little bit, so children will still see 2 specialists over the course of a week versus 4 specialists over 2 days. And so that was our way to kind of streamline who is going where in a hybrid model. So
The specialists at Park, we have a 4-day rotation, and we it usually goes like an A, B, or I mean a red, yellow, blue, green, and so we're just doubling up. So red. So each all the classmates will kind of stay on track for each of the different specialists. So they'll, a class might have the red day one day, they'll have it again for the B group red day. So it'll act like that. So it just extends it from a 4-day cycle to almost an 8-day cycle.
I have a question. Do you feel like you have enough time between now and Monday to have this ready to go? And please be honest.
A question to me, Joan? You might not. The staff are working extremely hard, and
Yes.
we are doing things that we've never done before. And I just would have to say that we work hard on a normal year. These 3 days are packed full of things to do. There is not enough time to get done the things that we need to get done, but we will make it work. But I think it is, looking back on this, I definitely feel like we needed time, as was recommended at our last board meeting. It is really, really hard to try to do this. And we have high expectations of ourselves. Staff have high expectations of the product that they put out. And there is no doubt that they are, that they are stressed, yeah.
Any other feedback on that question?
I actually had a staff member today ask if we possibly could have 2 extra days. Our staff, I think today at the middle school, there was a lot of energy, positive energy today. We went through a lot of information, and we have to remember, we've been talking about this for months, couple months. And for our staff, today was day 1 in the building, and whoa, it was a lot to take in, a lot. I've allowed a lot of work time the next few days with some guidance on what to do during that work time, but they need it. They need the time. They need, because we're looking at the middle school moving forward with instruction every day. Not Monday we're going to teach this, go home, and then Tuesday we're going to teach the same thing. At the secondary level, we are looking at the high bar, high standards, continuing to move forward each day, live streaming those classes. So I've got 12 kids or 15 kids in front of me. I also have 12 or 15 at home, and we're expecting them to get out of bed, join class, and be there live. So as a teacher, I've never done this before. I'm equipped to teach my class here, and last spring I had a chance to teach distance learning. But now I'm asking them as a building principal, we're going to do both this year, and we're going to do it really well. And so the next few days, teachers need to practice. They need to make sure their microphones are working. Kids at home, how will I answer questions of kids at home when I've got kids in here asking questions? How will that work? There was a lot of questions today, but I know our staff will rise. We have a nice seasoned staff at the middle school, They take on challenges and they team and they partner and work together really well. So it's going to be really busy. And the word I used today was yet. I had a sign. And I think we all have to remember we're not there yet, but we're going to keep making progress. It's a work in progress. So we have to have grace with each other. We have to have patience. And we're going to do the best we possibly can do on that first day of school.
I think I would also add just the curriculum planning, the lesson planning, and mapping out of the curriculum, and now doing that on an A/B schedule. So that's a new way to plan a year as well. So that's taking some additional thinking time and team time. And like you said, today is their first day back together as a team. We have had time to think about this, to process it, to problem solve. So we're asking our staff to, although they have always had it in the back of their mind, or have been part of development teams and problem-solving teams throughout the summer, for them to be together as a large team, today was really their first day to be able to do that. I think the other thing that's taking some time for them is just how to manage that hybrid day or that at-home day. What are the appropriate materials that children need in their hands? What are the appropriate lessons? How do we accommodate, like Mr. Wilkie said, families who are working, families who are at home, and trying to balance the families who are saying, this isn't enough, I want more, to, whoa, this is too much, back off kind of thing. So again, trying to balance that, and most importantly, doing what's best for kids. So.
We're going to move into activities, and our activities director, Thane Johnson, is going to speak to some of the changes with activities.
Thank you, Darren. Good evening, board. First thing, I guess, just kind of look backwards and kind of how we ended up where we are right now. The first thing you see there on the slide is the limited schedule. So back at the beginning of August, the State High School League made the decision to move on with 4 fall activities and then transfer 2 traditional fall activities into what they're calling a 4th season, and we'll get to that in a second. The 4 that are going on right now: soccer, girls tennis, girls swim and dive, and cross country. And when we talk about limited schedules, soccer has a 10-week schedule. Everybody started on August 17th with practices. And then they'll go for 10 weeks, and in that 10 weeks, they can play up to 11 games, no more than 2 games per week. But then also included in that 10 weeks is the possibility of some sort of what we call a culminating event. Maybe not necessarily a state tournament, but some type of tournament. That hasn't been decided yet. The league board of directors is still looking at that, looking at different possibilities of what that might look like. So we don't have any section tournaments or state tournaments right now, but in that 10 weeks there is that possibility. Girls tennis has set up for a 9-week season. Again, no more than 11 events, 2 events per week. Girls swim and dive has an 11-week schedule. Again, they have 11 events, no more than 2 a week. And cross country is a 10-week schedule with no more than 7 events and no more than 2 in a week. So when we talk about limited schedules, that's where we're at right now for the 4 activities that are currently ongoing. Guidance from the league has said that you should limit your schedules to either conference, section, or local schools. So within the Wright County Conference, we made the decision that we would play within our conference as much as we can. For soccer in particular, we've had to go out of conference for a couple games. Part of that is just because we don't have enough teams within our conference to fill all 11 games. So we do have a couple non-conference games with schools that are within an hour travel. Most conferences around the state have made that same decision to stay within their conference play, which has put us in a little bit of a bind, especially when we look at our middle level activities, particularly middle school soccer. We were short on schools that offered middle school soccer to begin with, and in the last 3 weeks, we've had 4 Wright County Conference schools that have decided to forego their middle school soccer program. And that has left us very, very short on games, but we are reaching out to other schools, trying to pick up as many games as we can so that those kids have an opportunity to compete as well. The next bullet point there, when you look at the 4th season, volleyball and football, they are moving to what we're being told is a season that would begin in March sometime. We don't have a solid date on that yet. The thought is you would start in the middle of March and go through the beginning of February. March through May. And then that would push your traditional spring sports back, and then those would start in the middle of May. And right now the proposal is to go through July. But again, we don't have any of those dates yet. The board of directors is working on solidifying some of those plans. Those 2 sports, along with our spring activities that were canceled last year, do have the opportunity to practice right now. Volleyball and football will start in the middle of September, and they'll be able to practice through the middle of October, up to 12 times, 12 practice sessions they'll be able to have. And then in the middle of October, our traditional spring sports will have the opportunity to meet with their athletes and practice again, kind of on the same pattern there. They'd be able to meet 12 different times and have 12 different practice sessions. Fan attendance is one thing that we've gone back and forth. There's not a consistent plan across the state. Again, kind of working within the Wright County Conference. What we've decided is that for Hutchinson High School, for soccer games, we will continue to charge. We will set up our ticket takers with PPE. They'll have hand sanitizer, protect those folks as much as we can. At soccer in particular, and actually I just sent this to Tina, and this form is available on the district website as well. Just kind of outlines what we're doing when we host home activities. Looking at soccer, we're going to cap it at 250 fans. The visitors' fans must sit on the visitor bleachers, home fans then in the home bleachers. Social distancing is required at all times. Fans at soccer will not be able to cross over the fence and into the track or field area. Fans must leave the bleacher immediately following contest. We will have portable restrooms available. There will be no access into the school. And for the JV field, because we don't have bleachers down there, we will ask fans again to bring lawn chairs to sit down at the JV field. When we host tennis matches, both here at the high school and then at the Park Elementary courts, again, there will be no spectators allowed inside the fenced-in area. So we'll have to set up lawn chairs on the outside, and fans will have to watch from outside of the chain link fence. Lawn chairs required again at Park Elementary, no access to the high school or Park Elementary, and again, social distancing is required. When we host cross-country events, and right now we are scheduled to host 2 cross-country events, again, spectators will not have access to student athletes, restricted to areas outside of the course width, and that was one thing the State High School League really emphasized, was to make sure that the spectators were not intermingling with the athletes. If you have ever been to a cross-country meet before, that is quite common, where a race will get done and parents or fans or whoever and the students are intermingled. That cannot happen this time. Spectators will not be allowed to congregate around the start or finish area. No access will be allowed to team camps. And then we will have portable restrooms available at Lake Marion. In addition to that, the State High School League guidance is at cross-country meets, there's no more than 3 teams. A typical cross-country meet, you might have 7 or 8 different teams there. The limit now is 3. Again, I said that's available to the community on the district website. I've shared it with our coaches, and I will share that also with the visiting ADs of schools that we are hosting. For girls swim and dive, that's probably the biggest change. There are no fans allowed at girls swim and dive. No fans inside the pool, and we will limit how many people can be in there. Only 8 timers compared to the 16 that it typically is. 3 table workers, coaches, and then when we do for the longer distance swim, any lap counters, those will have to be swimmers. We're again limiting the amount of outside visitors that are coming into the pool area. Next bullet point talks about distance learning impacts. If we get to a point where we have to go all distance learning, we have to suspend our activities, which means there's no competitions, and the only contact that coaches can have with their athletes is virtual. And again, that would go on for a period of time that we're in distance learning. No competitions, only virtual contact. Social distancing and safety precautions. Our coaches have been very good about really hammering home with the kids the idea that if we want our seasons to continue, these are the things we're going to have to do. Equipment is sanitized during each practice. The kids come to practice with a mask. They leave with a mask. We're taking all the steps that have been outlined in the Department of Health guidelines in order to protect our students, protect our coaches, and eventually protect our spectators that will come to our events as well. And then the last bullet point on there is transportation. Going into a hybrid model does impact our transportation a little bit. As it does with the school transportation, we'll have to go to a 50% capacity on our buses. So we may look at, in some cases, having to take 2 buses to events, which will obviously impact our transportation budget as we move forward.
Thank you, Thane. Questions on activities?
I just wanted to say thanks, Thane, for allowing us 250 fans at the soccer game. We were very worried about being full now. Football, it would just be packed full of people. So
right. Well, it'd be
hopefully
nice
we can
to see
triple our attendance and get at least 200 this year.
Dane, quick question about those sports that don't have any fans allowed, like the
Yes.
swimming and diving. Has there been any consideration given to web streaming any of those for parents and such?
Yeah, I actually just talked to Coach Fairbanks about that today. The swim and dive team's plan is to do their meets via Facebook Live, so fans will be able to have that opportunity. And we do have Huddle access, which you'd be able to stream that, and we do have an activities YouTube channel also, where we'd be able to live stream games as well. And I know there are some schools in our conference that aren't going that way. They have said no, only their home fans can come to games, and then they'll send us a link, and then I'll be able to share that out with families that they'll be able to watch those games on the road as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Thane, I just echo too what you said about the coaches. I know specifically I have a daughter that's a swimmer and a diver, and Coach Fairbanks is taking it very seriously and just, like you said, hammering home the masks and the social distancing and things like that, and taking it seriously, so doing a great job.
Yeah, and like I say, and it goes for the school thing too. If we want the kids back in school and we want the education to continue and we want our activities to continue, that's the kind of stuff that's going to be important. And like I say, I think it's important that families understand that if we do have to go distance, all of that stuff is taken away. Education-wise, it changes things. Activities-wise, it changes things as well too. So I think the more we can stress that, the better it's going to be, and the quicker we're going to get back to a little bit closer to normal.
Thank you, Thane. We're going to move into transportation. I think Brian Moore is going to give us an update on where we're at with transportation in the hybrid system.
Good evening. The first bullet point is, in this hybrid situation, we're supposed to be at less than 50% capacity. And when we did our parent survey a few weeks ago, over a third of our students' parents opted out of transportation. So when you take a third of our students out right off the bat, and then cut that in half once again, we're significantly under that 50% threshold. So we're sitting really, really well on that. So I want to thank the parents that actually have the opportunity to bring their child to school that are doing that to allow the people that don't have that opportunity a chance to ride the bus to get to school. With the good also comes the bad. In a hybrid mode with half of our students there, it shouldn't be a significant issue. Hopefully when we get a point to where we're all in person live, that means we're going to have a lot more parents dropping off at our buildings, which is going to create some more headaches, I guess, and people just need to be patient and work with the system and allow that time to drop those students off. In a hybrid situation, I don't see that as being an issue at this point. Some of the things also with cutting it significantly below that 50% threshold, we're able to maintain that 6-foot social distance between students on those buses. One of the things that's happened in busing is safety standards have now made the seat back so high. For most of our elementary population, they're isolated within their seat. They can't even see over the top of them anymore. So that's kind of what the crash standards have actually helped at with the distancing. They're going to be in every other seat. Try to cluster them with their siblings as much as possible so those groups can stay together in their own household. So if Johnny and Susie don't get along at home, we're going to ask them to get along on the bus when they're doing this.
Hey, Brian, at our last meeting, there were some questions on the drop-off at the middle school, and that seems to be one of the more difficult schools to drop off at. You'll notice that the middle school parking lot has been completed. I see it's been striped, and it's ready to go, and it should really help out with the parent drop-off, right?
Yep, I'd like to echo what Darren did. So we've probably tripled the amount of queue space where parents can drop off their students. And there's some of us that these first few weeks of school are going to be out in those parking lots every day helping to educate the parents to make that as smooth as possible. We had our bus meeting today, and I kicked off the bus meeting by quoting my drill instructor from 35 years ago, who said, "You must maintain a rigid state of flexibility at all times." We don't have all the answers. It's an evolving knowledge base that we have on dealing with this pandemic. Some of the things that we elected to do as a system is our bus routes are going to be the same regardless of our mode. What we didn't want to do is to try to change our bus routes if we change from hybrid to all in person. We wanted to keep it consistent. So if a child is riding bus 7 in a hybrid, they're still going to be riding bus number 7 when we all come back to school. So we don't have to reinvent that wheel and try to communicate that effectively with students. So in a hybrid situation, they're going to be running their same route, but they'll just be bypassing those households if it's not their day to come to school. Some of the other things that we're doing is we've narrowed the drop-off window at the buildings. The principals haven't spoken to it, but it's going to come up in a couple other slides. We're changing a little bit on how we're doing our breakfast in the morning. And the purpose of that is we want to get those kids off the bus in about a 15-minute time window and get them directly to their classes. So they're not congregating outside of the building or inside some of those common spaces. So the bus drivers are all aware now that they have a time window, and they're not going to be allowed to open that door until they've hit that drop-off window. Are there any questions that anybody may have of me?
Brian, I have a question. So is there a chance that some of the parents that chose distance learning or chose opting out of riding the bus, the reason was because of all the people on the bus or all the people in the class, and now maybe if we're hybrid, they would choose to come to ride the bus or to be back in school? And is this week still a window for them to change their plan?
We're going to go with what our policy is, and our policy is pretty much the month of August is a blackout time period because we have to get those bus routes out and published. We're going to be as accommodating as we can, but we also have to allow those bus drivers to look at their routes, know who their students are and where they're at. We will, just as I believe, I don't know if it was spoken to tonight, but there's requests from changing different learning modes. And maybe I'll switch that over to Dr. Scott because we're going to kind of follow the same thing with transportation when we are with other educational modes.
Other questions on transportation?
Thank you.
We'll transition into food service, and I'll hand it over to Leslie. She'll talk about some changes with our lunch program.
Yeah, so for lunch and breakfast, we will be having designated areas for people to expand in and eat their meals. That'll depend on the building and what the principal or teacher would decide what that space is going to be. I do believe at West Elementary we are having the kindergartners eat in the cafeteria and the first graders going to their classrooms. No, change that.
All of the students at West will be eating in the lunchroom, and we have them spaced out, and they'll have assigned seats.
Okay. So like I said, it's kind of building a situation, what they've decided where those spaces are going to be. But as far as going through the line, we're making sure that they're going to be keeping their 6 feet social distancing. We are not using our dishwasher this year. Everything's going to be disposable tray. They have a packaged fork and napkin. All the food service staff is going to place the food and the packaged napkin and fork on the tray. The only thing that they will grab themselves is the milk. We'll offer the milk if they want. And I did get that cleared to a health inspector because it is packaged. We can allow them to grab their milk. And sometime, later in the year, I'm hoping, maybe we can offer fruits and vegetables that they can grab too, as long as they're packaged. But for right now, we're just kind of starting simple and getting our bearings and just training up what is necessary for the meal to be compliant for lunch. Similar to breakfast, all of them are going to be grab and go before school starts. Elementary is kind of where kind of a stall, and that's yet to be decided what we're going to do there, but they will get a type of breakfast every day. For distance learning or the hybrid when they're at home, we're going to have an order system much like we did for summer feeding, where they will go online, order either breakfast all week, it'll be a week-to-week order form, or lunch all week, or both all week. And then from there, we're going to designate an assigned building, which will be their pickup spot weekly. So the whole year round, they will be assigned a building on a particular day and time, and they can count on that from week to week. That's when they'll be picking up their meals. And that should work through distance learning or hybrid model. That will not change. That was it. Any other questions?
I think we need to make sure that families know that starting when school starts, there's a charge for the food. And so, and it's still easy to find the forms and to fill them out for free reduced lunches, breakfast. Yep. Breakfast is free for everyone, but lunches, we pay for them once school starts.
Yep. For breakfast, we will follow the paid meal charge policy like what you're referencing. Breakfasts are free for grades K through 5. And then 6 through 12, there would be a charge for the grab and go. And yes, out on the website, and if you need a paper copy, the free and reduced lunch forms are available. We do encourage families to fill those out and apply for those benefits as needed.
I think that's reminded throughout all our plans about they're free to apply. They're looking to have free meals to try to, encourage them to apply because, families are going through hardship more than ever, so they really shouldn't hesitate to apply, and they might be surprised. So I really encourage that families do that.
I think it's important that our families know too that they need to reapply every school year, correct? So if you are a returning student, you do need to reapply after August 1st every year.
Anything else on food service? I want to quickly mention our face covering requirements. All students and staff will be required to have a face covering. If the student is not able or the staff member is not able to handle a regular face covering, a cloth face covering, we will allow for a face shield as an alternative. And we're going to continue to work to give kids face covering breaks where they can get outside and take it off. So I don't know, principals, if you have anything to add to that.
I guess I just have a comment, Darren. So just to clarify for the public, because I get this question all the time, The mask mandate, we did set a policy, but that's because we were required to. We didn't come up with the mask mandate. That's mandated by the governor or health department or Minnesota
Yes.
Department of Ed, whoever says everybody has to wear a mask.
Yes, and that would be the requirement across the entire state. It's not just Hutchinson schools or any school that's operating under the public K-12 rule set is got to have some type of face covering or face shield.
Because there's a little bit of a misconception that since we passed a mask policy, that we're the ones that are enforcing this, implementing it, and requiring it. It's actually the state's requiring us to do it.
Yes.
It's not us.
And as we had talked about last time, it doesn't matter if you have the policy in place. We did pass the policy because that was the advice we got, that it's best if you do pass the policy. But even if we wouldn't have done the policy, students and staff still would have been required to wear a face covering.
And the only way that that would change is if the governor came out and said that was no longer required.
Correct.
Okay.
Hygiene practices, I know Brian and his staff have been working hard on getting the hand washing stations out. You can see tonight there's hand sanitizer everywhere now. So we're hoping to push that and make sure people use that. I don't know if there's any questions or anything to add to that. Anybody? Cleaning, Brian, you want to touch on that?
Sure. So with this virus that we're contending with, there's been all kinds of Department of Health and CDC guidelines as far as properly disinfecting and the products to use with that. So we have done in-services with our custodial team, and what we are doing, because we can't create more people and more custodians, so what we're going to do is forego some of the cosmetic things. On a normal routine year, we vacuum our carpets every single day, and we dust mop our hard surfaces every single day. Well, we can't do that and disinfect everything that we can, that we have to do. So we're going to do some trade-off with the time and not hit those visual things as often and concentrate on those high-touch areas and disinfecting those surfaces that need to be disinfected. So we're actually going to move some of our evening custodians into daytime positions, and that way they'll be there when our student body is there and when our teaching staff is, and their primary focus is just on those high-touch surfaces. So they've received the training on that, and a few weeks ago we were nervous about the start of school year as far as supplies. We've gotten very creative on where we've been purchasing, how we've been purchasing. I had a custodian here 2 weeks ago, was at Costco with his wife on a Friday night. He called me, hey, they have a whole bunch of hand sanitizer there. Well, how much can you get? Well, there aren't any signs. I said, just do whatever you can, whatever you feel comfortable with. Well, so him and his wife carried 56 gallons of hand sanitizer out into his vehicle and brought that back to the district. So we're getting them through our normal suppliers also, but we've had to get creative, and things are coming in now, so it's going pretty well. One of the things I also want to mention, there isn't a slide on it, but one of our other mandates is to maximize the amount of outside air coming into our facilities. So most of our building automation over the years has been focused at saving energy. We've thrown that out the window. So we're maximizing all of our air handlers to run 24/7, 365 throughout the whole entire school year until some of these changes to maximize the amount of airflow that's coming into these buildings. This building has 100% outside air, so it doesn't recirculate any air except for a couple of small offices. When we build our new building, that will be the same. Our buildings that have unit ventilators, Park Elementary School and West Elementary School, during this time of year, they'll be bringing out 100% outside air. As we start to cool down, we can't have 100% outside air, otherwise we'll freeze everything up. But we're going to maximize the run times that we have on the air handlers and do the best we can to get the maximum amount of outside air into the buildings that we can. Any questions on cleaning practices or the operations of the buildings? Thank you.
I would just add one other piece. We were concerned at our last meeting because the state had promised us the PPE. We would have that prior to school starting, and they were working through the Southwest West Central Co-op. And I was notified this afternoon that those pieces, they've acquired those, they're warehoused, they've got everything labeled for Hutchinson Public Schools, and we're going to pick those up this Thursday. So that's the face mask, the face shields, all of those pieces. So we will have those prior to school starting. Monitoring for illness. Becky, I don't know if this is an area you want to take and talk about.
I know a lot of places are screening people as they enter the building. There isn't going to be a change if we go hybrid. There isn't a change in that, a quick temperature check on the way into the building. I know some kids, maybe their parents go to work before they even leave in the morning. I don't know. Is that impossible to suggest? Or?
Yeah, we haven't talked about doing that with every single student. We can certainly have that discussion. Becky will describe kind of the process that we have in place right now, and then we can have that conversation.
Okay.
So for our families, we're asking that they self-screen their students before they leave and get on the bus or are dropped off at the school. For our staff, we are going to be distributing tomorrow afternoon at the latest our annual notification and acknowledgement for the employee handbook. And along with that, there'll be a link to a waiver that each employee will sign that indicates that they are going to be self-screening themselves throughout the school year. But in addition to that, if somebody is not feeling well, this is in the works right now, it's not finished, we're considering a form that would ask all the pertinent questions regarding symptoms, and if an employee has 2 or more of those symptoms, they need to be filling that out so as to notify the building or the department if they're experiencing something that could be high risk or that could be a safety hazard to others. Then we would know about it, we could trace it, we can keep track of how they're doing and what's going on. Our licensed school nurse, I don't know, Karen, if you'd like to update on the educational video?
Yes, the district nurse is going to be putting together videos for families on how to do that self-screen at home, and also go through the checklists so they know what questions they need to be able to answer. And then also she is putting together videos for staff on the signs and symptoms of COVID, just so everybody can be on the same page of what to look for. And then also go through the flow charts that have been created so staff understand where to go to find those resources and how to use them.
And then just a very important reminder to staff, students, even spectators at sporting events, if you're not feeling well, please stay home. Because if you can take care of yourself, you can help keep yourself, your family, and everybody around you healthy and safe. And that will just bode well for our district as we move throughout the school year. Okay, each building does have a separate room for COVID-19. So if you're experiencing respiratory symptoms, there's a quarantine room or a health room that's been designated. We are in cooperation with Minnesota Department of Health, local public health, regional support teams as well. I don't know if there was an update today on the call about any of those resources. I wasn't on the call with the region, but I know Darren was. So when I finish the slide, maybe he can give us an update on that. If you are tested and you are confirmed to have COVID, you do need to quarantine for 14 days. There are lots of programs available to employees. I won't go through all of them because I know we've done that a couple of times in previous board meetings, but just know that the federal acts that provide for COVID sick leave, extended FMLA, those are still at play until the end of the year. And then in addition to that, we do have leave categories, leave benefits in all of our employment agreements. But we really expect that we follow the Department of Health guidance. There is that quarantine period for 14 days, and an employee who is confirmed to have had it should not return until they're symptom-free. That close contact is really important too, because if we're notified of a confirmed case, we're going to do tracing and have conversations with the employee or any staff member to try to determine if they've been within 6 feet or 15 minutes or more, for 15 minutes or more with other employees. And then we do encourage staff, if they're experiencing symptoms, to be tested between that 5 and 7 day mark. I can take questions there.
I actually have just a comment about the testing. So Minnesota Department of Health is very much encouraging to try to get this testing done for people who have potentially been exposed between day 5 and day 7. The issue that we're running into on a health system standpoint is testing capacity. And people who are asymptomatic, we don't have enough tests for those that do have symptoms, let alone those that don't. So right now, getting that testing done, I'm just sharing this to set expectations that just because the intent is there that we would get them tested in day 5 to day 7 doesn't mean we're going to be able to test them from day 5 to day 7. The other thing that I want to highlight is once we get to that point where testing is available, if you've been exposed to COVID and you don't have the symptoms, a negative test at day 5 to day 7 doesn't mean you don't have it, and it doesn't mean you aren't going to get it. So even if you are tested and you don't have symptoms, you can still contract it later. So that means still be in a quarantine situation for that full 14 days, regardless of what that test shows. The test really only brings value to the contact tracers, not the individual person. So that's very important to make sure that people realize that if you don't have symptoms and you get tested and it's negative, that doesn't mean you can go about your daily business. That means you still must stay in quarantine for that full 14-day period.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Today at the meeting, I was updated on where the Minnesota Department of Health is at with the testing. If you recall, they had promised that every educator, every employee, every staff member that worked in a school district was going to be afforded at least one test each. So what we learned today, and I don't have the information in writing yet, but what we learned today is they're going to send us out information. So each employee will get a URL code, and that'll be for them for their testing. So they would complete an application, they would use that URL code, they would receive a test the next day in the mail, they would self-administer that test, and they would send it back to the state testing site. And that's how they're going to turn them around. And they're telling us they can do that within 48 hours. So that information is going to come to us later this week. We'll communicate that with all of our employees, and we'll get that sent out. So prior to the first day of school, people will have this in their possession.
Are they required to opt into that?
The district is not controlling any of that. So they request the test from the state health department, and they send that test to them. The district does not handle any of that information. We do have a responsibility. Our COVID coordinator will have the responsibility of tracking some of that. If it's a positive test, of course, we can do contact tracing and all that. But the testing itself is going to be directly between them and the Department of Health and those doctors.
But it's voluntary though, right? Nobody's making them take a test?
No, they have to determine themselves. And this is not like a screening, say for me to come back to school. This is, they've been in contact with somebody, or they have symptoms, and then they're going to self-determine if they should use their test.
One thing I would bring up is here locally, if someone does develop symptoms of COVID, they should contact their local physician to get a test at the hospital or the clinic. Sure. It's going to be more reliable than the saliva test, and it's going to be potentially more rapid. So definitely contact your physician if you believe you have COVID symptoms.
So this was part of their presentation today. They had suggested they'll have this sent out to us by Thursday, so our employees can expect to get that information by the end of the week.
One other thing I wanted to mention, Joanne, you brought up temperature screening. Just to share with everyone that there's a lot of controversy right now in the medical community and with the Minnesota Department of Health around that. And the reason is that only about 50 to 60% of people with COVID get a fever. So it can give a false sense of security if you're screening someone and they don't have a fever to assume then that they do not have COVID. So that's where the whole spectrum of questions comes into play. And that's why you need to really use all of those pieces of information to adequately screen somebody, not just the one.
Mental health and well-being, I don't know if there's anything new there that needs to be reported or said. Okay.
Is that for staff as well as students? The staff still has the, I can't remember
The EAP.
EAP available. Good.
So it's in the main learning guide the safe learning guide that we published today on the district's website. It's underneath staff resources on the website, and then in addition, if you are in the HR payroll frequently asked questions, there's a link there to it. If all else fails, just call me and I can definitely help patch you through to that program.
At the elementary this week as well, we have a training on Thursday with our schooling mental health provider. She'll be offering a 1-hour session for staff to think about social emotional learning, mental health of our students, as well as their own needs. So that's coming out this week.
We talk a little bit about distance learning. I think we've had a little bit of movement in the district from families. I don't know, Mike, if you want to speak to that, or Becky, if you know some of the enrollment numbers there.
Yeah, and the building principals too, as they've been working with their staffs this week and prior. But K-5, there's designated teachers. As we sent a survey out a couple weeks ago asking families whether they were choosing, if we were when we're coming back to school, whether they wanted to have distance learning full-time, regardless of our mode of delivery. So we took that data and then we're able to use that in order to place students in classrooms to determine how many teachers we may need. So in the K-5 classrooms, there's designated teachers that are the distance learning teachers for those students. So if you're a first grader or second grader, those distance learning students are in those distance learning teacher classrooms. In 6 through 12, it gets with electives, and even more so at the high school when there are elective classes. They're not able to be put into one elementary classroom, for example. Those students who are distance learning will be accessing their classrooms just like the hybrid students would be doing at home for the majority of their classes. There's a few situations where there's some teachers that are able to take all of the distance learners in a classroom. But the majority of the classes the students are accessing those just like the hybrid students do at home.
I'd like to also commend the teachers at the elementary level who have stepped forward to be, or agreed to be the distance learning teacher, because this also is something brand new to them. Teachers did not go to college or enter the profession to be a distance learning teacher necessarily, so we're thankful for their willingness to take this on, because it also is something very brand new that's requiring a lot of extra work for them, thinking, analyzing, teaming, and things like that. So we're thankful for the teachers who have agreed to play those roles. Not play the role, be in that role.
Yes.
So then an additional update on the enrollment is a little bit of information about students who are actually leaving our school system. So just a moment ago we were talking about distance learning opportunities, and it's really important to differentiate between distance learning and homeschooling, or going to an online academy or to a different district. So while we have over 200 students enrolled in distance learning, they're going to have a licensed teacher, one of our employees, working with them on a curriculum that we've purchased, that we've been working with. However, we have 46 students who are leaving our system altogether. 8 of them were identified as opting for PSEO that we didn't know about previously. 35 are planning to enroll elsewhere or homeschool. So again, that homeschool option, the families are obtaining their own curriculum, they're drawing up their own schedule, they're pacing it on their own, their enrichment, that's all figured out within that household. There are 3 who are undecided regarding their next step but don't plan to return. One footnote that I wanted to add is that this is really interesting, because while we have these 46 families or students and their families indicating they're leaving our system, right now our add drop list actually shows that we're net ahead by 16 students. So it's just so fluid right now, and we don't have all the paperwork in from all the districts that we're working with, and so we'll just continue to monitor this and take another look as we move into hybrid and then into our next steps throughout the school year.
Thank you. Nick, do you have a technology update?
Yeah, some of the technology changes, I guess, are really just a review from last meeting. Chromebook redistribution, again, we're moving some Chromebooks from a high school, middle school to help out at the 2nd and 3rd grade and K and 1 so that they can better serve for the hybrid model or the distance learners. And the 4th and 5th grade, BYOD also helped free up quite a few Chromebooks, so we're just redistributing some of those Chromebooks around the district so that we have more available for those classrooms. We also are purchasing some software so that teachers can better interact with their students when they're not in front of them, if they're at home, and if they need to do some recording or some of those things, some Edpuzzle and Screencastify, some of those different softwares like that. And also we have, I mentioned earlier, some access points for families that are in need of, if they're having problems with their internet or need some help there, we also have those available. So, any questions about technology changes?
Do we still have technology staff on furlough?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
We brought them all back.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
That's what we have for an update on where we're at right now. Based on our previous resolution, you don't have to take formal action on hybrid learning unless you disagree with the recommendation. Otherwise, we will continue to move forward with that, and we'll let our families know. We'll send an email actually tonight through campus, letting them know that first day of school would be a hybrid learning model, K-12.
Maybe this got answered and I just didn't hear it, but did the staff feel today like that's what we were heading to, and so they started today working towards that?
Yes, I did talk with the high school staff and also the West Elementary staff that would be the recommendation. And I did feel like there'd be any resistance from the board. You still have that option, but that is the conversations that I had today. We're gonna have similar conversations with Park and the middle school tomorrow.
Just to be clear, the only other option is distance learning, right? With our number, I mean, we can't say, no, we're going to everybody back to school because our number won't allow us to. Because you said if we agree with distance, I mean, the hybrid model, the only other option would be online for everybody, right?
Yeah, well, the other option too is you could have hybrid for elementary and distance learning for high school. That's the next level. If you chose to do that, our numbers indicate that we wouldn't have to do that, and I'm not recommending that.
Right.
If you do that, that also shuts all our activities down. I think that's important for our students as well. If we think we can do hybrid safely, I think that's the right thing to do.
And just to be clear, we can't go backwards because of the numbers. That's driven by the Department of Health, right? So
it would be very difficult for them to approve that at this time, especially knowing what our out numbers are in the next couple of weeks here.
Okay.
Any other questions for our administrative team?
Can I just say thank you? Thank you.
So I was just going to say on behalf of the board and our community, I'd like to thank our administrative team and our staff. Boy, incredible planning and effort to put into this first day of school and beyond this year. So thank you for all of your efforts to make this work. So yeah, just a first day of school that none of us could have imagined. So there are no further questions. The board has one additional board topic, but administrators do not need to stay for that. You can if you'd like, but if not, you are dismissed. And again, thank you for all of your efforts.
If you would turn your mics off before you leave, if you plan to leave. Thank you.
Feel free to put us on the list for your weekly bulletins and your newsletters and stuff again, if you get a chance.
Okay, so our board topic this evening is board compensation. There were some questions about looking at updating the board compensation for the school board.
Thanks, Chairman Camrath. This is a topic that I teed up with our administrative team, with Darren, Becky, probably about a year ago. Is taking a look and examining the board compensation. Last fall, our Director of Business and Finance, Becky, did an undertaking and really compiled a lot of data in terms of our board compensation, other school districts' board compensation, other boards in general, locally here, compensation for what they're paid, and that's a lot of good data, and I can certainly get that over to you. But I think tonight I just wanted to tee up the conversation with the board to discuss it. So historically, taking a look at it, the board has not adjusted its compensation in 15 years. We've been at the same rate of pay, if you will, for being on the board. So, you know, like I said, Becky did a lot of work last fall, and I think what I'd like us all to do, I took a look at my personal meeting load as a board member, and I'd like us all to do that at some point in the future. Just think about it. So if you take a look at that throughout the year, you have you know, your 12 regular board meetings, you have 4 quarterly board meetings. Myself, I have 9 technology meetings. We don't meet in the summer. I also have 3 other meetings as a LCTN board member, and I have 12 finance meetings. So that's 40 meetings a year, and that doesn't, you know, encompass any negotiations or special board meetings or other commitments, you know, such as that we have to do. And, you know, I want to also say with this topic of conversation that none of us are on this board for the pay. We're not here because we get a financial compensation or because we're trying to, you know, do this as a money-making opportunity or anything like that. We do it, number 1, for the students, and number 2, to improve the quality of our school district and to do public service and to serve the community. So that is, at least that's my driver for being on the school board, and has been for the last 4 years. It's never been about the money. But also I understand that this topic can be perceived as self-serving as well. You know, to look at your own pay and look at what you're given as a monetary amount each year can be perceived as being a self-serving type of endeavor. So I also am receptive to that as well, but I also want us to take a look at it and think about it. We get paid a salary of $3,500 a year. You know, when Becky pulled some of the data, you know, you pulled data from a lot of different districts locally, you know, the Litchfields, the Atwater, Cosmos, Grove cities, you know, GSL, some of those types of things. While that's valuable data, I also don't know that that's an apples to apples comparison with being on the school board in Hutchinson either. you know, and I'll certainly, you can send it to the board, your findings, otherwise I can as well. I also want us to take a look at what other boards in Hutchinson are paying as an example. I look at being a city council person as an example. You know, the salary for that is nearly twice this pay. And I want this board to maintain, to be a vibrant board, maintain professional candidates moving forward, always be perceived as one of the best boards and best public service opportunities in the community. And so that's why I feel like this topic needs to be revisited. With that, I'll open the floor to any questions or discussion or anything like that. If you want to ask me about any of the data, I can certainly do my best to pull it up as well live here. Otherwise, we can just have an open discussion on it as well with thoughts and questions. I'm not looking for any action tonight. The one thing I will say though is if there is going to be action on this item, I feel like it should happen this year. We have an election where there's going to be 5 open seats and potentially, depending on who's all elected, 5 new positions on there. And I don't know any new board member or newly elected board member in their right mind that would ever vote to give themselves a raise on day 1 or week 1. So I would perceive, or I would propose that if we were going to do something about this, that we do it this year before a new board is seated in January.
Yeah, I was just going to say on Chris's comment, we talked about this every year in January, but then it's 3 new board members typically that are on, and like Chris said, nobody in their right mind would say, hey, I just got on the board for 4 years, I'd like to raise my pay. And it never happens that we have 3 or 4 board members that are going off the board. And so if we're going to do it, I think we need to do it now before the end of the year. And like I said, it's typically on the January agenda, I guess, every year to set the board pay, but if we're going to make a change, I think we need to do it prior to January. It's not fair for new board members to come in and say, well, we don't know anything about this, but let's give ourselves a pay raise. It wouldn't look good in the community, and I think it looks better from my standpoint. I won't be coming back on the board, and so if I vote to increase the pay to get better candidates in the future and keep this viable with other boards in the community, I'm not going to be getting a raise because I won't be getting a check again. So I don't see the conflict of interest that it might look like if the new board members would do that. So I agree with you, Chris. It's been a long time, and we obviously aren't doing it for the money, no matter what we change it to, whether it's a couple $100 or $100 or $50, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be the hours you put in, but I think it's something, and it would help maybe get more candidates to apply for the board.
And now that being said, my mic's still on, that being said, the previous election, we had 3 people run unopposed. Now, I believe the number is 11 that just signed up for the 5 positions. So, you know, you can look at that and say, well, do we really need to raise it when we just had 11 people that filed to be on the board? I still feel like that answer is yes. I just think that it's been 15 years. I think it's something we need to look at.
Chris, I agree. I think, you know, we want to be respectful of people's time. I guess that's what it really boils down to. And the people who work on this board put a lot of time into that, and they put a lot of energy into that. And I think having adequately reflecting that through compensation is something that should be something that we all agree on. It's amazing to me it hasn't changed in 15 years. I mean, the last time it changed was before the last time I was on the board. And I'm an old guy now, so it's just, you know, it's very amazing to me that it's taken that long. And I understand the politics behind it. It's a very difficult decision to make. It can look bad. People will not be happy with it. I understand that. But I think we do need to recognize, the public needs to recognize the time that's put forward beyond the meetings that they see on television.
So did everyone receive the, I think the analysis from a year ago? Chris had sent out, I think, some numbers, but was there an attachment with that? I'm trying to recall.
I think it was internal to the finance committee,
Okay.
And so it did not go to the full board. So I think, you know, we can get that out to the full board and review that. Again, I want to bring it up while we're able to talk about it in public. So as an example, if we take a look at it, you'll be able to view this data when you see it, but you look at, there isn't even data, I don't think, for GSL, or as an example, Litchfield, but so if we look at, say, the district of Princeton, enrollment of 2,900, they get paid $5,400 a year. If we look at, I think the other one that I was looking at was possibly Fergus Falls, enrollment of 2,835. I'm trying to get as close to our enrollment as possible. They're also at $5,400 for the year. But I'm also comparing to local boards as well. So I look at a city council person here in Hutchinson as an example. I believe their salary is roughly, the last analysis was about $6,200 a year. I look at a utilities commissioner board member, they make about $5,300 per year. I think we need to take a look at the local dynamics as well, and not just school board salaries as well. There's definitely, on the data, there's definitely lower salaries than ours, there's definitely higher ones. But I think just maintaining that, being competitive and like I said, wanting to be that viable board and things moving forward. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I think, is there any other questions on it?
So I would just have a couple of comments. One is that I think that keeping board salaries all the same rather than differentiating by position, I don't know that there's a lot of difference between the positions. So to just keep them the same would be the only suggestion I would have. The other comment is that I've never been very comfortable having this discussion about raising my own stipend. So I'm not really going to say much about this. So I guess, especially for the members going off, you kind of know what it takes being on the board. Whatever guidance, suggestions you might have, I'll kind of leave it at that. So thank you for considering that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, and it is uncomfortable, and no one wants to bring it up. And I think, like Byron said, it's for myself, for Byron, for Brian. I mean, we're able to bring it up because it's not going to benefit any of us at this point. And that's just the pure facts of it. So I understand, for those that are even running again or that will be on the board moving forward, it's a difficult conversation, but I still think it's a valuable one.
So maybe a good next step would be to send out that comparison so that all board members have that. You can look at that yourself. When you receive that, as always, don't reply all or reply, just use that for your own information, and maybe start to formulate, if you're thinking about some change, what that number would be, and we can continue to have this conversation then. Any other thoughts on that, Becky?
I did just share the document with each of you, so you'll get an email notification in your district email.
Good.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yes, the only other thing I'd mention is we probably don't want to do it tonight in the darkness. Let's do it at a regular meeting when it's televised and people can hear us discuss it or at least vote on it. Not just have it show up in the paper that we did it. So that'd be my only comment.
Sure. I think it might have been Chris that she suggested maybe we do this at the December meeting, so it'd be the last meeting of this year, so that would be active for the following year then.
And I think it could honestly happen whenever, as long as everybody's had a chance to review the materials. I mean, I would.
Sure, yeah. Well, of course, the board can do whatever they like. I think that was, your thought, and again, just
I think if we set an effective date of January 1, it wouldn't really matter when we voted on it, because then that would push it beyond the three of us coming off the board for sure. And then I guess the next question would be, would people prefer to have it before the election when they don't know if they're coming back or not, or after?
Well, we can have those discussions too, so let's
Sure.
think on that, and everybody can consume the data, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Any other questions, comments on that topic? If not, we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, this is a weird thing. We can actually just voice vote here. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. And we are adjourned. Thank you all.